And get started. We have Molly Hope with us. She's a physical therapist, and she's going to talk about freezing of gait. And I'm going to have her tell us a little bit about herself, where she works, and all that good stuff. So I'll turn the time over to her. Yeah.
Louder. Right, again. Now we're working. Okay, amazing. I can also project my voice if need be with that microphone. I'm here. We're going to, oh yes, this one's working. Okay, we're going to use this one. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Molly Hope. I am a physical therapist here in Lincoln. Actually have a little about me slide on my I
share your screen.
Oh, thank you. I have to share my screen. So our Zoom friends can see. Oh yeah. So I graduated from the Duke University School of Medicine Doctor of Physical Therapy program in 2015. I did a neurological physical therapy residency at Creighton University. After that, I earned my board certification in neurological physical therapy in 2018. And then I opened Lincoln's first neurologic mobile physical therapy practice in 2019, which feels absolutely crazy to me that that was 7 years ago. I think in like 4 days, it will be exactly 7 years since I opened. And then I've been Power Parkinson's Wellness Recovery Certified since 2022. So I share that so that you know why I know things about this topic and maybe why you should believe what I say when we talk about freezing of gait. I think it's helpful to know who you're listening to. So we're going to talk about freezing of gait, which is a very clinically interesting phenomenon that happens in Parkinson's. Can I get a show of hands to see who in the group today experiences freezing or has ever experienced freezing? Okay, so we have a few hands. Not everybody, but we do have a few hands. So we are going to go through a little roadmap today when I'm talking about freezing. I think most people, if they're coming to a talk about anything kind of rehab or physical therapy related, you want to know some useful information, right? What can I do when this happens to me? How can I be prepared if it hasn't happened, but may happen down the road? I think an important part of that, though, is understanding what's actually happening and why it's happening. And then we'll talk about how you can reduce the chances of freezing occurring, and then what you can do literally in the moment when it's happening. So to start, what even is freezing? This was originally defined about 15 years ago as a brief episodic absence or marked reduction in forward progression of the feet despite the intention to walk. It was updated this year by the same Consortium for Freezing of Gait, which was a group of experts, essentially neurological and movement experts, movement disorder experts. And they updated it because they felt like the original definition was just a little too vague and didn't capture truly what was going on to be able to completely define it. So now it is defined as a paroxysmal episode wherein there is an inability to step effectively despite attempting to do so. So freezing is essentially feeling like your feet are glued to the floor, your body is frozen in space, just generally feeling stuck. The name is very literal. It's like you're trying to walk, you're doing your gait, and you feel frozen and unable to move forward. Here's the real test. Can I get this video to work? If you have not personally experienced freezing or seen someone who has experienced freezing, here's just a, oh, Hold on, okay. I had a backup plan. So this is a video of a gentleman walking, just so people who haven't personally experienced freezing can see what it looks like. So you can see as he approaches this, I think it's a little rug that's on the floor when there's that transition of surfaces. And then when this gentleman is trying to turn, he's not really moving. So this is a textbook example of what freezing looks like. During a freezing episode, you may experience or see someone experience a range of symptoms, if you will. Shuffling of the feet without actually progressing forward is very common. That's probably what I see most frequently clinically. You could see knees kind of trembling in place. What's least common is no movement at all. That's called akinetic freezing. It does happen, but it's the kind of rarest form of physical manifestation of freezing. But that's where someone would truly just look like a statue. There's no tiny movements of the feet. There's no trembling or bending and straightening of the knees, just completely frozen in space. And freezing can be asymmetrical, so it can happen in only one leg, which is something not a lot of people realize. So one foot can be stuck while the other one is trying to move. And if you can imagine trying to move forward with only one of your legs going, that can impede your ability to go forward as well. Freezing typically occurs during what we call transitional movements. So turning when you are starting walking, so getting up to start walking, or if you're standing having a conversation and you want to start walking again. Changing surfaces, that's what we saw in the video. So going from carpet to a hard surface, going over a threshold, things like that. Going through doorways or tight spaces, a great example of trying to maneuver through the crowd here today. And anything that requires essentially a shift of what you're doing in any way, right? We're changing from one position to another, we're changing from one surface to another, we're changing from one degree of space to another. Freezing can happen during any of these. Freezing can also happen during non-gait movements. We're not going to talk about that today because I'm talking about freezing of gait, but it can happen during upper body movements as well as speech. What we know about freezing now, it's typically in those kind of rhythmic, repetitive movements. So if you're thinking about freezing happening in the upper body, it's usually going to happen with something kind of automatic and rhythmical, like writing, drawing. If you're, kind of nervously tapping your hand or something like that, you may experience freezing there. And then during speaking, you can experience freezing of the muscles and movements of your mouth. Episodes of freezing typically last only less than a few seconds, but they can be much longer. People can be frozen for 30 seconds up to a minute, but the average duration of a freezing episode is 1 to 2 seconds. The more severe your freezing is, typically the longer you've had it, the longer it's gone unmanaged, the more likely you are to experience those freezing episodes lasting for longer periods of time. About 50% of people with Parkinson's will experience freezing at some point, but it's much more common in more advanced stages of Parkinson's. So, the way statistics works, about half of people with Parkinson's experience freezing, but something like 80 to 85% of that 50% are people in their more advanced stages of Parkinson's. Now, why is this happening? So here's the bad news, especially for the folks who experience freezing, who saw this topic today and were like, I'm gonna maybe learn some real tips and tricks. You are going to learn some real tips and tricks, but the bad news is the medical community honestly doesn't understand freezing of gait very well. It's still very unknown in terms of physiologically what exactly is going on. Research is ongoing. Because we don't know exactly what causes freezing, you can deduce that we don't know the best way to treat it either. Those two things tend to go hand in hand. The more we learn about what's going on in your brain when you experience freezing, the more we know how to target treatments. But we do still have approaches that we can take to manage it and reduce it from happening. We do know that freezing occurs most often when you are in the off phase of your medication schedule, or if your medication dose is suboptimal. I wrote in here with 2 exclamation points, talk to your neurologist. If you are experiencing freezing of gait, even if your other motor symptoms are pretty darn well controlled, that could be a sign that your dose is suboptimal. So even if you feel like everything else is going pretty well and you're happy with the control of your motor symptoms, freezing of gait showing up is a sign that you may actually need to adjust your medication dose or discuss different medication options, and your neurologist is the best person to talk to about that. But we also know there are multiple factors that impact freezing of gait. So these aren't our true like scientific pinpointing here's in the brain where it's happening. But we believe that freezing of gait is impacted by sensory and perceptual impairments that happen with Parkinson's, cognitive changes, a person's mental state, and then disruption of the normal neurological pathway that most people with Parkinson's are experiencing because they are having motor impairment. So I'm going to talk about each of these individually, because knowing what area or areas you have the most impact in that contribute to your freezing of gait will help determine what the best treatment approach is and what the best kind of compensatory strategies can be for that. So we're going to start with sensory and perceptual impairments. Personally, clinically, this is probably the biggest one that I see. Most of the time when my patients are freezing, it's during some type of experience where they're having to process visual and tactile information, like going through a doorway, traveling over surface changes. You might think that those things just happen automatically, but when you have Parkinson's, all of those sensory processes aren't working as efficiently as they were before you had Parkinson's, and your brain can sometimes have a hard time integrating that information. So when I'm walking, this is a great example in this room right here, when I'm walking over this carpet to tile, my brain automatically shifts very minutely to be able to make that transition from a grippier surface to a more slippery surface. But if your brain can't do that automatically, it may kind of short circuit, if you will, because it can't integrate that information properly, and it causes that automatic movement of stepping to stop, because that communication, let's go from carpet to tile, has just halted, and it's almost like you hit a brick wall and then your feet stop moving forward. Doesn't have to just be vision, it can be touch sensory through your feet, vestibular, that inner ear, kind of knowing where your head is in space and knowing where your body is in space. All of these things contribute to our ability to just exist and walk and stand upright or push a wheelchair or anything. And if you're not getting accurate information into your brain, it's going to have a hard time outputting to tell your feet to keep moving. So you can't accurately plan or execute your movements, which leads to those triggers being things like surface changes, doorways, crowded, tight spaces. Any time you're having to make those little adjustments, if this is your primary area of difficulty, that's where you're probably primarily going to experience those freezing episodes. Cognitive changes can also impact freezing quite a lot. I put these in order, basically, of what I see clinically. With Parkinson's, we often see a difficulty with dividing attention or performing multitasking. So that can be as simple as walking and having a conversation at the same time, but it can also be trying to pay attention to a whole bunch of things while you're moving. We know that people with Parkinson's tend to have less efficient focus shifting between tasks. And that means that those movements, while you're doing lots of other stuff and are distracted by things, is just less automatic. So those automatic stepping motions, again, are impacted and lead to those feet being frozen. There's also some greater difficulty kind of ignoring irrelevant stimulus and being distracted by things in the environment. So all of these things can impact, especially if you're walking through a busy area, or even just having a chat with a friend or a loved one while you're walking, can lead to those triggers of freezing happening with multitasking, conversing, really stimulating environments with a lot of noise, lights, things like that going on, as well as time crunch situations. So people often will report that if they're feeling rushed, their freezing gets worse. Which is, not what you want to happen, right? You're already feeling rushed and now your feet can't move at all and it's going to take even more time. But this is because that additional stress on the brain of feeling rushed is just adding to the entire load that your brain is having to process. And your brain stops talking to your feet briefly. And then we have mental state. So this kind of ties into that feeling rushed, but we also know that anxiety, stress, being distractible, having decreased alertness or tiredness, as well as pressure from yourself or external sources, people around you, loved ones, can all lead to increased episodes of freezing of gait. Now, I personally have never worked with someone who only has freezing due to these factors. Most typically, we're having some sensory and perceptual factors playing in, having some distraction, multitasking difficulties playing in. But if we add anxiety about a situation, like it's a high stress situation, like traveling, for example, or going through a really crowded, tricky area, like if you're going to see a live theater performance or music performance, for example, can all increase the episodes of freezing of gait in someone who otherwise has fairly minimal symptoms. So all of this, all of those three are kind of because of that general neurological pathway disruption that happens in Parkinson's, right? So we know people with Parkinson's have a diminished production of dopamine in their brains that disrupts how the brain typically sends signals and creates movement. So all of those things above combine to essentially overstress the brain's threshold for information. And when we overstress that threshold, that automatic movement essentially stops functioning. Now, it's not permanent, right? Like I said, most of these episodes only last a few seconds, but it's almost like, imagine it's like a little short circuit in an electrical circuit that just misfires briefly, and then you can get back on track using some strategies that we're going to talk about. But the more difficult your situation is, whether it's time crunch, super complex, tricky environment, tricky surfaces, lots of people around, lots of obstacles to negotiate, the more cognitive load you have, the more distractions, the more you're trying to have a conversation, the more you're thinking about while you're trying to move, all disrupt that automatic continuity of walking and can lead to more episodes of freezing. Okay, so if you do experience freezing, or if you don't experience freezing, but you want to plan for the future and be aware of what you can do when you do start to experience freezing, we're going to talk about what you can do to actually reduce the number of freezing episodes that you are experiencing. So first, you have to understand that everyone is different. Like I said earlier, freezing is unfortunately still very, very poorly understood. And it's extremely individual, different to every single person living with Parkinson's. So you're not going to have a cookie cutter answer for what the best treatment approach is for you. I wish, I think every physical therapist, every movement disorder specialist wish we could just wave a magic wand and have a treatment for this, but it's just not the case right now. Again, the first step is to talk with your neurologist about your medication, because we do know through the research that's been done on freezing that it most often happens when medication dosing is not optimal, or there are some, on-off time period things that can be optimized to reduce the likelihood of freezing happening. But the second step is to work with a specialized physical therapist to determine what your personal triggers are for freezing. Because if you don't know what causes your freezing and you can't problem solve around that, you'll just be throwing every treatment at the wall and seeing what sticks, and that's a very inefficient use of your time, and it's probably not going to work as well as really working with someone who understands freezing. So just like in medicine, physical therapists are specialized too. And I encourage anyone who needs to work with a physical therapist to please seek out someone who has expertise with Parkinson's, because we're not all the same. Just like I would never offer my services to someone who just had shoulder surgery, because I would literally have to Google what to do to help them because it's been so long since I've treated that. I wouldn't want someone with Parkinson's, which requires specialized expertise to treat, to just see a generalized physical therapist who kind of knows a little bit about everything. And then once you've identified what your triggers are and you have a personalized treatment plan with that PT, ongoing exercise and focus training is essential. Unfortunately, Parkinson's right now is a lifelong condition. It's not something that you can just do one little treatment bout and your freezing is gone forever, right? You all know much better than I know, because you live with it, that your Parkinson's sometimes changes daily, right? Your symptoms can change daily, and things are going to fluctuate and ebb and flow. And so you may need some tune-ups here and there, or a new approach if your freezing triggers have changed. I did want to share a little bit about this new piece of technology. And when I say new, I mean, it's literally only been tested in one person. But there are ongoing clinical trials starting right now. This is a wearable robotic, like soft suit that was developed by Harvard and Boston University Robotics. They published a single person study in 2024 that showed very promising results. It was a 100% resolution of the subject's episodes of freezing, which 100% resolution of symptoms for anything in any kind of medical device is really wild. But of course, that was only in a single subject. So ongoing clinical trials are happening. This is a big one for me, because I have throughout my career learned and been trained on so much technology that looks really super cool and amazing, and was developed by very smart people who clearly have never really even talked to someone who lives with a condition they're trying to make these things for. So the feasibility of even independently operating and putting on this device if you live with Parkinson's, I'm hoping they do a lot of that in their clinical trials, and they're not having just trained professionals strap people into this and then saying, oh yeah, you can have this for home use. Having a larger study population, obviously, because one person does not give us nearly enough data to see if a treatment is effective. What the cost is going to be like. If any of you have ever used specialized equipment, you know medical equipment in general is extraordinarily expensive. So my guess is, even if this shows really tremendous results, it's probably not going to be accessible to the general population. And I really doubt it's something that Medicare would cover. But we will see as more information is gained. But I think it's very cool that it shows that there is funding for research for this issue, that people are thinking outside the box, and that we can be hopeful for future treatments, because there is ongoing research. But if you are someone who experiences freezing, this is probably not something you will have access to anytime. It is just not. Okay, so here is probably the real question, right? You're frozen in space. Now what? All of that information is great, but maybe unless you're a clinician who really cares about what's going on in your brain, what are you actually going to do if your feet are glued to the floor? So this is my very basic do and don't list, and then we're going to talk about some actual specific strategies. I always recommend you stop and just take a minute for a deep breath and reset yourself. Stand up tall. Posture is always important. Standing up tall does a couple of things, right? It brings your gaze forward so you can see where you're going. It aligns your bones and your muscles so you can move more optimally. It's going to help you be able to weight shift if you need to do that to get unfrozen. And I think people just feel more confident when they're standing up tall versus, being hunched over. And then use your strategies that you have either figured out with your physical therapist, or if you've taken this list of strategies, things that you've tried out. But what I think is sometimes more important than the what to do is the what not to do. Please, and this is easier said than done, but please don't rush yourself or your loved ones. So if you're with someone who's frozen, sometimes the tendency can be to, kind of speak quickly, try to get them going. I can say with 100% certainty, there are very few things in science, medicine, anything that are 100% certain. With 100% certainty, that's not going to help. And it's probably going to make it worse. Don't give too many cues to yourself or to someone who's frozen, because that's just going to overload the brain even more and give more things to process. And don't try to just push through. It will literally feel like just pushing into a brick wall. Freezing requires making a detour, if you will, in the brain. It's like a concrete barricade. Maybe if you had a big enough and fast enough semi truck, you could blast through it, but you need to find a way around it and not push through it. So there are several categories of unfreezing strategies, just like there are categories of things that cause freezing. There are categories of ways to help you get unfrozen, and they link up with each other, right? So if you have freezing episodes that are maybe more related to distraction and things like that, your strategies are probably going to be related to that. But you may find that a combination of strategies works the best. I really encourage people to test them out. Again, working with the PT is a great way to do this, because you can just kind of camera it out, trigger your freezing over and over and over again with the PT there, and then have them there to guide you through these strategies to see what works best. Again, a combination may be the most successful, so you may need to do a few together. And then there may be certain situations where a given strategy works better than other situations. So I encourage people to keep a log of what's worked and what hasn't, just like keeping a log of your medication on and off periods and things like that can be really helpful. There are so many strategies that if you don't write them down, it can be hard to remember what works and when. And just a general proponent of writing down your symptoms and things like that. It's a lot to keep track of. Okay. We're trying to. This is a really cool artistic rendition of a study that was done by a Dutch medical group. They polled a bunch of people, it's a scientific, a bunch of people with Parkinson's, and talked about what strategies worked for them to improve their gait when they were freezing. And then they made this very cool poster. It's called 55 Detours, with which Parkinson's patients bypass freezing. And they divided up into 7 categories and then have these cute illustrations for them. So if anyone wants this presentation or just wants this link, I can email it to you. It's a great little artistic representation of these strategies. So I'm going to go through those categories, and we're going to talk about some specific strategies so that if you do experience freezing, you know someone or love someone who experiences freezing, or you just want to have some ideas for the future, you have some actual concrete steps you can use right away when we finish up today. So the first one is cues. These can be external and internal. I'm sure any of you in this room who have done any physical therapy for any Parkinson's symptom are familiar with at least some of these. External cues are things that are happening outside of your own body and your own brain. So that includes visual cues, putting markings on the floor. So let's say you know that you freeze every time at home when you're walking into a certain room, or walking into the bathroom, or walking into an area of the kitchen. Maybe you can put floor markings down, brightly colored masking tape that give you positions for your feet to step onto, using a laser line like in a U-step walker, stepping over someone else's foot if you are out in the community and you don't want to go grab a stick or something to put on the ground, just having whoever you're walking with put their foot out in front to give you a visual marker to step over. That can be helpful. Auditory cues like a metronome or music, or someone telling you to take big steps, or counting. Tactile, having someone tap you on the shoulder or help with arm swing if you don't use an assistive device. External cues can be a really great strategy. They work for a lot of people. They don't work for a lot of people. So you really have to test things out. But external cues can work really well for people with Parkinson's because of that automatic movement system is not working as well as it should. So we're bypassing it by bringing this external component to help it continue. So you can also use internal cues. So this is like telling yourself cues, counting to yourself, giving yourself those big steps, stand up tall cues, or even just visualizing taking steps. Cues are a great option. They are quick. They are usually simple to do. You can try a bunch of different types. For scientific purposes, try one at a time to see what helps. Don't try like 7 cues at once, because then you won't know which one is the most beneficial. And then when you have some that work, write them down so that you can remember them for later. The next category is motor imagery and mirroring. I think this one's really interesting. It kind of taps into a lot of what we're learning about movement training and precision in like professional athletes. There's a big movement towards using a lot of visualization and training, and you can use this too. So again, visualizing those steps, visualizing footprints or markers on the floor if you're out somewhere where there aren't any that are laid down for you. Imagine yourself stepping over something. Or you can mirror and imitate someone you see in the crowd walking. And you see them walking, you say, okay, I'm going to try to match them or follow whoever you're walking with. These can help bypass that roadblock when you are moving. Changing your balance requirements can also be very helpful. So we do know that oftentimes the more balance impairment someone has, the more likely they are to freeze. Is that because of the balance impairments or just because the Parkinson's is more advanced? We don't really know, but we do know they tend to couple together. So adding or changing an assistive device can be a really effective tool. If you don't use an assistive device at all, but you are freezing a lot, sometimes adding a cane or a walker can eliminate the freezing. Doing something like pushing a shopping cart if you are experiencing freezing in the grocery store, having that hand support and something you're steering can break up that movement pattern to help you be able to step. Holding on to someone, so if you don't have an assistive device but you're walking with someone or you have a friendly passerby and you're stuck, sometimes just putting a hand on a shoulder can be enough to get you unstuck. Weight shifting back and forth is probably like the most popular recommendation for getting unstuck. So literally just shifting side to side or front and back. So you're getting some movement, but you're breaking up that stepping pattern. Honestly, I have pretty mixed results with just that cue, but it's probably the most popular one. If you look up freezing of gait tips on the internet, they're going to tell you to weight shift or do some marching. Yeah. Some people do great with that. I personally, with the patients I work with, typically use some other strategies. but you can also rock back and forth on your toes and heels. Anything that is changing your body's balance point can help you get unstuck. Altering your mental state. If you are finding that you are typically freezing in high anxiety situations or high stress situations, I worked with someone who really only froze, like going through TSA security lines. I understand that. We can simulate that and work on stress management techniques and practice and kind of exposure to that to help. So things like deep breathing, meditation practice, counted breathing. You don't have to stop and do a 20-minute meditation when you're frozen, right? But these things on a regular basis can help support your ability to remain in a calmer state when freezing is going to be triggered. But taking a few deep breaths or counting your breaths is certainly something you can do in the moment. Don't discount the idea of just some positive self-talk and encouragement. It can seem a little cheesy, but saying some nice things to yourself, either quietly or out loud, can just kind of disrupt that frozen piece that's going in your brain. And a lot of people tend to have some negative self-talk when symptoms are occurring, right? Like, oh, I'm so mad, I can't take steps, I'm so frustrated, why can't I do it? You know, and then it just spirals, and then your brain is spending so much energy focusing on that negative self-talk, it's not helping your brain get back to the walking. So say something nice to yourself. I had a gentleman, a very unrelated talk I gave a couple years ago, tell me something that he does for himself, and I adopted it. I absolutely love it. He didn't even have Parkinson's, but he said he just loved going to talks about topics he didn't know things about because he was a contestant on Jeopardy in like the 70s. And so he loved gathering information. And he said that in his retirement, he continued to quiz himself to keep his brain sharp. And when he did something well, he would pat himself on the head and say, "Good job, brain." And I just love that. So I do that myself. I do that for my patients. It like seems a little silly, but it makes me happy. It usually makes people chuckle. And sometimes that's enough. So if you take no other tips, maybe just take that "good job, brain" home with you and see if that helps. You can like pump yourself up, you know, do a power pose. Did anyone else stay up way too late because they were excited from the basketball game last night? Yeah, you know, you see those guys, they're getting so jazzed, they're like running around, flexing their muscles. Do that. Yeah. Okay, maybe some people are judging you, but it literally doesn't matter. Who cares what you do? If it helps you get through a freezing episode and it's not hurting anyone, do it. Pump yourself up. Walking to music, that gets an auditory cue, but music that makes you happy, that is going to help with that alertness, that positive mental state that can help reduce freezing episodes. The next category of tips is adopting a new gait pattern. So if your automatic kind of normal walking pattern isn't working, let's try to circumvent that by doing a completely different pattern. So this can be something like marching with high knees, taking really giant steps, huge big arm swings, walking in a different direction, so sideways, diagonally, backwards, walking on your tiptoes, walking on your heels, walking like a duck or a penguin. Again, that's kind of fun. If you haven't gathered, I'm a little bit of a silly person. I like therapy to be fun. I think it makes living with things that aren't so fun a little bit more palatable. So pick an animal and walk like that animal. Do some dance steps. Anything that takes you out of that walking pattern that is not so automatic anymore and circumvents it and really makes your brain focus on doing something else can help you get out of your freezing episode. So if you want to do a little cha-cha to get out of the freeze, I think that's a great example. Sometimes, honestly, I tell patients just do any movement that's unrelated to walking. So that can even just be moving your head or moving your arms. It gets your brain away from that stuck point for just long enough to reset, and then your feet can start moving. And that can really help if you truly feel like your feet are just absolutely glued to the ground and no amount of thought or effort or cues are getting them to move. Trying to think about weight shifting or marching can sometimes be impossible. Let's see if you can move your arms or move your head or your torso. That can be an effective solution too. And then finally, sometimes we just need to find alternatives to walking, right? I know I've said this probably 4 times already, but we really don't understand freezing that well. Our treatment options are not that great. I hate to say it, but they're not right now because we just don't understand it that well. And sometimes we just need to find an alternative to circumvent it altogether. Cycling, riding a scooter, using a wheelchair. If it's safe, putting on some roller skates, doing something that's just completely an alternative to walking can sometimes be the best answer. And this is especially true if you have, again, certain scenarios where your freezing is happening most consistently. So sometimes the answer to getting through that TSA checkpoint is to use the wheelchair through the TSA checkpoint. If you've gone through all of the strategies and they don't work, use a wheelchair to get through it and then walk the rest of the way. These alternatives to walking too, especially things like cycling, are just good for people with Parkinson's anyway, because you get that continuous rhythmic motion, you're getting the cardio in, you're getting the movement in, which is good for general well-being anyway. But I put this one at the end because, of course, we want to find ways to keep walking and keep moving if that's a personal goal. But sometimes recognizing and accepting that there may be certain scenarios where that's just not the most appropriate option and there can be alternatives. And that is all I have to say in a structured way about freezing of gait. I do have some references if people like that. Again, I can provide these and who wants that. But I would love to take any questions that people have about freezing or other topics too.
Do you see people in their homes?
I do, yes. Yep. Yes. Oh yeah, thank you. Carla even reminded me when Carla was on the speech. She said, make sure that you repeat people's questions. The question was, do I see people in their homes? And the answer is yes, I provide treatment in people's homes. That's the way I work. We have quite a few mobile PTs in Lincoln now. I'm proud to say I was the first. I believe there are only 2 of us who have like extensive Parkinson's expertise. We have a few orthopedic mobile therapists and some kind of general therapists who have home health and what I call some light neurological experience. But myself and Amber Harrington, if anyone in the group knows her, she's amazing. Provide home visits for PT. Yes.
You said to me, I can send it out to the whole group.
Perfect. I will do that.
Children.
Yes. I will send this presentation to Joyce, and Joyce can send it to everyone. And then you can look up those references in all your free time and enjoy some scientific literature. I'm a big nerd. I like really do that for fun, but I understand that most people don't. It's another thing. Yes.
We've got a whole room full of professionals right here.
Yes.
That they tap into, you know. But I'm doing the Bryan Hospital, Rock City.
Yes.
And they're doing wonderful things with the community.
Yes.
And the people that I'm associated with down there, it's a one machine. And here since, right before Thanksgiving, right after Thanksgiving. And, it's a good blessing, what it is. And, like encourage anybody that wants to know just out, do that. It's a long machine. Did you hear anything like that?
I was gonna say, I can repeat or you can, repeat too.
It's a, Life Point is, the program it is, and, rock steady, punching bags and gloves and it's everything. We go from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 3:30, and it's a good program. Want to try it out? Come on over there. And I go on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's a good program.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of boxing programs for people with Parkinson's. One of my friends used to run a boxing program, and I volunteered with her, helping with the classes.
One more thing.
Yeah.
We just had Michael J. Fox. His daughter came to town. There's one guy that goes to the Life Point overplay. His daughter came to town. She works for him, Michael J. Fox. So she came in, took part working out.
Yeah, that's great. Rock Steady Boxing is a great program for multiple reasons. It's tackling cardio, balance, strength, all that, weight shifting, getting full body coordination movements. Boxing is a really great physical activity.
You know, with me, when I freeze up, one of the instructors over there, coaches, we call him, I'd be standing there and he realized that I was freezing. And he put his foot out, step over.
Yep, yeah, so that's a great example of using an external visual cue.
Yeah.
By having someone put their foot out or having a visual marker on the floor. Because again, what all of these strategies are doing basically is disrupting that automatic movement, right? Because before you had Parkinson's, you probably never had to think about walking. Is that correct for most people? Yeah. And now maybe you have to think about it a lot, or maybe it's just a little, it depends where you are in your journey. But before you had Parkinson's or any other neurological condition, you probably never had to think about walking. It just happened automatically. And Parkinson's disease interrupts that automatic process. And if we can circumvent that by using a great external cue, like here's my foot, step over it, that can be super helpful. But any of these strategies do that for you. They help you circumvent that automatic process that is stuck. But everyone's different.
Come back here. One of the guys that told me, he says, "You play golf?" Yeah, play golf. We use a golf club to wave your training to make a line, if you will, and then step over that line and go.
Yeah, using a golf club, using a cane. So if you have to use a cane for walking, I would not suggest you throw it on the ground, so then step over it, to be clear. But anything like that, that gives you that line to step over can be super helpful. Yes.
Yeah, one of the things I think is important is if you have freezing of gait, is to let people around you know about it. One of the things, I am a manager of a swimming pool in the summer. I tell all of my lifeguards, I have Parkinson's, I have freezing of gait. It's what happens. This is what helps me get by. A lot of times it's better to stand there, you can move. You know, if they make fun of it or, you know, something that what for me works great. And, or, you know, they'll start counting out loud or they'll just say B. You know, but let people around you know about it. So that way they can help you get through it.
God, that is such a great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. That letting the people on your support team and the people around you know so they can help you with your strategies Or if you don't need their help for strategies, let them know so they know what's going on. Because I can definitely say, like, the general public, and I know when I've been teaching physical therapy students who, until they become more trained, I categorize as also the general public, like, really want to help, right? How many people are like, have a hard time getting out of a chair and everyone just wants to rush and help, and most of the time it doesn't actually help because they're doing too much or they're not helping in the right way, because people are well-intentioned, but being helped in the right way is essential. And that's such a great point about sharing what works for you, what's going on, so that if you do need help, people know how to help you in a way that is effective and that you don't jump in and make things worse. Because I think it's usually easier to say, hey, this is how you can help, this is what I don't want you to do, than in the moment have to tell someone who's trying to help you, like, hey, back off. So don't be afraid to do that either, if you need to. That's just part of self-advocacy when you have any kind of health condition. If someone is trying to help you in a way that's unhelpful, don't be afraid to tell them to stop.
A question, Molly, if someone would like your services, do they need a third physician?
That's a great question. If someone would like my services, do they need an order from a physician? So I can speak to my policies personally and then legal policies. So in the state of Nebraska, you do not need a physician referral to see a physical therapist. Medicare also does not require a referral to see a physical therapist. What Medicare does require is that a physician on your team, it can literally be any physician or a PA or a nurse practitioner, be willing to sign off on the care plan, but it doesn't need to be a referral. Each clinic and provider has different rules about that. So I know some of my colleagues and a lot of big clinics, because they just have so many referrals and they deal in such large numbers, do require a referral just because some insurances need that and some don't. So it's just easier to have a blanket policy. But for me, I don't require that because it's not required. So it's just removing extra step. I think I can probably speak to most of us mobile people that we operate the same way, because we all have really small caseloads, so we can take on that extra step of calling a physician for you.
So there was one more thought in my mind, and I might have left. But does one have to be homebound to receive mobile therapy?
No, does one have to be homebound to receive mobile therapy? This is a great question. So there is a lot of confusion. I too was personally confused when I started doing this, the difference between home health and mobile therapy. So home health, that's typically through an agency like Tabitha, Kindred, Hillcrest. We have a ton of them in Lincoln. And that will require being certified as homebound by a physician, meaning that you either are unable or it's an undue stress to leave your home for appointments other than very periodic medical appointments, going to church and things like that. And that is built in Medicare Part A. Mobile therapy. So all of us mobile folks in Lincoln, we describe ourselves as like outpatient on wheels or outpatient that comes to you. So you do not need to be homebound. It's essentially just like a concierge service. You could go to outpatient, but you either don't want to, or it's just easier to have someone come to your home, and it's billed through Medicare Part B, which is the outpatient benefit.
Is your information on your information that you're going to send me to send them?
I can put it on there.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I know you gave us some background on yourself, Lauren, but how did you decide on Parkinson's and movement?
That's a great question. So how did I decide on Okay, this is actually kind of a funny story, and I have some time, so I'll share it briefly. So I knew that I wanted to go into neurologic physical therapy during my schooling. I originally thought I wanted to be an orthopedic physical therapist. And then I realized that that was like really not as cool as I thought it was going to be. But during my clinical rotations, I was placed on an inpatient neurologic unit. And literally my first patient that I saw when I was just a fresh new student, and I was terrified and I had no idea, and I really shouldn't have even been allowed to touch patients. It was like my eyes were open and I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was just so interesting, so rewarding, getting to be a part of people's lives when they're going through something really rough and life-changing is very special and humbling. I also have a couple of chronic illnesses. It's really not the same, but I feel like I kind of have a little bit of a kindred understanding of what it feels like to receive a kind of life-changing diagnosis and live through that. So I'd like to be able to work with people and help people who are going through, again, it's not a similar thing, but going through those big life changes. And then brains are also just really cool. I think they are the most interesting part of the human body. They're so complex. We honestly know so little about it. So just from a nerd standpoint, I find it very interesting. But I was what I would call myself a neurologic generalist for most of the beginning of my career. So I saw people with stroke and MS and Parkinson's and a little bit of everything. And I said I was pretty darn good at it, but I wasn't specializing in any kind of specific diagnosis. And then I had a friend ask me to do a presentation with her on the physical therapy side of Parkinson's. And I said, sure, I know enough about that. I'll do that. And then somehow, this was like 6 years ago, somehow after that presentation, the people of Lincoln decided that I was like the expert on Parkinson's physical therapy. And I got all of these phone calls from patients and people sending referrals. And I was like, okay, now I actually need to become an expert, because I am the type of clinician where I want to give you really, really, really good care. And if you have a condition or something that I am not an expert in, I'm going to find you someone else who will, because I would want to be treated by an expert. And so I expect that people should want them for themselves. So I was kind of thrust into it, honestly, because I knew enough to give a like vague presentation about the importance of exercise in physical therapy and Parkinson's. And then I kept getting all of these phone calls, and I decided that I actually didn't become an expert. So I did some training, a lot of training and a lot of reading. And I ended up working with a ton of people with Parkinson's who were really my primary educators, right? Because books can only tell you so much and courses can only tell you so much. And you guys are just a fun bunch. So I really loved it, and the snowball kept rolling, if you will.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing the
Yeah, my pleasure. So I will send this presentation. I will include my information if you have questions. I will just say, I don't do these presentations to try to get new clients. I'm actually not accepting patients right now. My caseload is full. But I am happy to talk with people and facilitate and provide resources and answer questions. So I'll include my info. That's kind of, I sometimes forget to put my stuff there because I really am not trying to solicit new people. But I'm always happy to help and facilitate access to resources.
Do you have a wait list?
Yes.
Well, again, we thank you and appreciate you coming. That's wonderful. It's always good for us to get a new vantage on things.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Welcome everyone, and those on Zoom also. Do we have anyone here today that has never been to our meeting? Okay. Then you know everyone, right? Oh, in the back. Oh. Well, we're gonna have you introduce yourself. She's really thanking her friend for pointing it to her.
My name is Carla Fowles. I'm from Fremont. I have been to a support meeting in Fremont. It's been a few months ago. It was kind of comparable to this, but not as big.
This is quite a big room, isn't it? Did you bring this? Or is it? Oh, just her husband. She's great. Yeah. Well, we're happy to have both of you and come back anytime. Love to have you. Anyone else who would like to say something or introduce themselves or whatever? I see these two red books over here on behind the table. Those are wonderful books with a lot of good information. So I would recommend that you maybe grab one, tell Jim, wherever Jim is, there he is, that you have it. And so you can bring it back so the next person can read it. But it's a very informative book by Dr. Ray Dorsey and Dr. Okun. So that's my platform today. Read those books, please. Also, Carla reminded me, she's not here today, but they're signing the Parkinson's disease proclamation with the governor on April 7th at the Capitol, and they'll be meeting in the Warner Chamber at 9:00. I'll send out an email about that. But I think it would be nice if some of us could be there. Last year, there was a blizzard. Carla did make it, and several other people did make it. And they had a lovely picture in the paper, but there were no people with Parkinson's in the picture. And I think that it would be nice to let people know that we exist and that it's a great cause to be a part of. Then the other thing, yes, Shirley? 9. Living with Parkinson's from Research to Care is going to be in Elkhorn on April 13th. And this is a program for people with Parkinson's, their families, their friends, medical providers, whatever. There's no charge. There is a registration required because they are providing lunch. And it said that check-in, lunch, and resource fair begin at noon. And then the program is going to be from 1 to 4:30. So I think I sent out an email once about the registration. I will send it out again. Because that's coming up pretty soon. So next month is Parkinson's Awareness Month. So we need to, I don't know, wear your t-shirts or somehow make the community know that we are fighting this battle and trying to share it with as many people as possible. There'll be 90,000 people in the United States that will be diagnosed with Parkinson's this year. So we have a real cause to propose to people that there's a lot of help along the way. As our speaker, it will be Andrew Loudon. He's been here once before, a couple of years ago, I think. And he's a trust and estates attorney. So he'll be very knowledgeable in that area. Are there any other announcements? Anyone have anything they've read or learned or want to share? Okay.
I still work full time at school, and I'm with the office force. but I approached my principal to a Parkinson's awareness, just a table. Coming up close to the 11th, so that my coworkers, some know, some don't, and I'm not going to just say, hey, why do I have Parkinson's? But I made a poster that says facts and some famous people, or things to look for, so that they can recognize the people. And then sugar cookies and paper tulips, just to bring awareness to stuff.
When did you say it was?
I'm doing it April 9th.
Well, that's nice, you're sharing it. And if you want to take some of our brochures or our cards, we'd be happy to supply them. Anything else?
Does anybody here grow up in the North Isles? Hang out, look out, down, down the stadium. Anybody got any ties to that area? Yeah. Well, I just wondered, I got a map for the North Bottoms from 1929, and there's vast, every business down there was a carcinogen type business area. And there's a article in the newspaper about the ground that was, a lot of the houses were built around, have to be remove the ground and put new ground down there.
Well, Thunder, thanks for setting up the Zoom. And Jim has our little library over here, and he's probably got more stuff in his basement than he'd like to share. But we appreciate him hauling this stuff in each month. Sally had some refreshments, and there's the brochures over there that we'd like to share, and business cards are available that we'd like to share. And you meet Diane and Cheryl at the front desk every month, and so we appreciate all of their help. And once again, we're going to divide up into two groups. The care partners will be in the kitchen, and you got to get your food before you go in there. And the rest of you will be in this room, and you can have food and beverage too. So we hope to see all of you next month, and Parkinson's Awareness Month.